Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, fall camp is almost here. We're getting so close. You can almost smell it. How does it smell? It's football players in the heat. It's not great, but it's still, it's not. It means football season's getting here. So we're gonna put the smell to the side, and we're just gonna focus on the storylines and what we're watching.
Well, the first 3 days of practice, fans have paid to attend, so there'll also be some food trucks there. So it kind of smells like wings and maybe some gyros and maybe just those things, and also Nike. It always smells
Mhm.
like Nike at camp. And so we've previously talked about the offensive players who have the most to gain. So we're going to talk about the defensive players who have the most to gain. And Tom, I let you go first in the last show. I'm willing to let you go first again. That way I can tell you, I can give you a gotcha or I can disagree with you, which is always my favorite thing. So if you would like to begin, what defensive player right now on your mind do you think has the most to gain in fall camp?
I'm gonna go with Zion Grady.
Mm,
And I think the reason I'm going to go with him, I think there's a lot of guys you could. I mean, frankly, there's a lot of guys you could go with just on the defensive line and
mhm,
say, yeah, sure. Uh, I think though Zion Grady is someone who, coming out of last season, he's someone I think we were talking about as this is someone who could be a starter next year,
mhm.
and I don't know that he's really locked that role down yet. If he can do that in fall camp, then and you're the defensive end who's starting opposite Kenyatta Jackson, that sort of sets you up for not just a good season, but probably a pretty good career at Ohio State. His stats last year, he was solid. I mean, as a true freshman, 13 tackles, a couple tackles for loss. That's a very, very solid season. Had a sack, and but you kind of look through and it's like he had a TFL again and the sack against Grambling. The other TFL came against Minnesota, but he played enough later in the season that he played in the net in the playoff game against Miami. That tells you they trust him in a big moment there. So if he can sort of take that next step and earn that starting defensive end spot opposite Kenyatta Jackson, or at least really, really solidify himself as a major part of that rotation there, I think that would be a big, big thing for him.
Yeah, and you say very solid season. I want to clarify you're talking true freshman seasons, just so people
Yes,
don't
right. Yeah.
don't get upset. Like, yeah, we're talking about a true freshman season for a defensive end. That is a very solid season where you've got a bit of a contribution. But by the end of the season, he was playing the third most snaps behind Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson. He had gone past Beau Atkinson a little bit in playing time. And in that Miami game, Kenyatta Jackson 63 snaps, Caden Curry 60 snaps, Zion Grady 3 snaps. Like those are the only three defensive
Mhm.
ends in that game. And he had played 16 against Rutgers compared to 12 for Beau Atkinson. He played 18 against UCLA compared to 17 for Atkinson, 15 against Purdue to 9. So he had kind of surpassed, and we did talk in the offseason. Well, if he's already passed by Beau Atkinson, if he's leaving, he's even. At this point, there's no turning back for Zion Grady. But it sounds like Beau Atkinson had a very solid offseason. You could put him on this list in terms of the most to gain, and I don't think that would be wrong because this is his last year in college football, and he's this is the contract year, and if he can keep from being passed by a younger player, which is the fear of every older player, basically, like he's got a lot to gain, and if he can be productive, then he can turn that into an NFL career. So I think you could throw Epi Sitanilei in here as well as the redshirt freshman who could be that guy, or Qua Russaw. Basically, any of these guys that isn't Kenyatta Jackson have the most to gain. And frankly, you could throw Kenyatta Jackson has a lot to gain as well in terms of becoming a top 5 NFL type draft pick with a big year. But it's just any of these guys opposite Kenyatta Jackson could be the guy. So I think blanket, just throw them all in there, and sure, we're all right. We're all correct, Tom. But can I tell you about Riley Pettijohn
Hmm.
at linebacker, who we did not get to see in the spring? And we've said before, talking to Ryan Day about the difficulty, one of the downsides is they don't know what he can do specifically. So they've got to figure that out in fall camp, and they don't want to waste too much time doing that. So I think he's got a lot to gain here because at this time last year, or like during the season last year, people viewed him as the next guy, whether that's, Will or Mike. He's going to be starting in 2026, and he's a monster. Look what he did against Grambling. I just want to warn people, you can't base the future on somebody based on what they did against an FCS opponent. That's a dangerous ground. But we also know Riley Pettijohn is a dangerous linebacker based on recruiting, glimpses, intel, all of these things. And so I think maybe out of anybody else, I'm just fascinated to see where he ends up in the depth chart and usage in the scheme. And if he's versatile enough to play any of the three linebacker spots, that's going to be good for him. But I just think he has a lot to gain because that Will spot is not settled. And what if he settles it?
Yeah, he is absolutely someone who I would have on this list as well. But I think a lot of the stuff you said about Riley Pettijohn, you could also say about TJ Alford, who
Mm-hmm.
Riley Pettijohn was playing a little bit more than TJ Alford was for most of last season. And Alford had one more snap, I think, in the Rutgers game than Pettijohn did. But they were kind of within sight of each other in terms of, and these are, again, two guys who were true freshmen last season. So you typically, from the true freshman season to your second season, you're going to see these guys take a little bit of a leap. And these were guys who were playing enough. They were getting rotational snaps over older players in a lot of cases. So those are guys who you see that as a true freshman, you kind of go, okay, these are people who need to be in that next man up conversation. And TJ Alford was healthy for the spring, so he probably picked up some ground on Riley Pettijohn, you would assume, with Pettijohn being out in the spring. So now I think you could say a lot of the stuff you said about Riley Pettijohn, say it about TJ Alford as well. I was going to mention Christian Alliegro because I think Christian Alliegro is someone who they brought in expecting him to be a starter. I think based on what we saw in the spring, I'm expecting him to be a starter. It's just a matter of you've got some really talented players behind you, and this is not going to be a position you win by default. So how much of a role can you carve out for yourself? Are you someone they're going to feel comfortable having on the field all three downs? Or are you someone that they're going to have to pull off situationally, depending on what the opponent is doing? Just the opportunity to show that and just show, yes, I can be a 3-down linebacker for Ohio State this fall. And also, not only that, I am a better 3-down linebacker than all these other really talented guys who are in this room. I'm expecting big things from Christian Alliegro this year. I think he's going to have a really, really good season for the Buckeyes. But you've got to kind of give people the stiff arm to keep them at a little bit of a distance and make sure you are staying in that sort of at the top of the depth chart there.
Yeah, and if he is that Will and can also play some of the Sam on the line, then that leaves that third linebacker spot for either Alford or Pettijohn or Stover or somebody else. But like even if that's Riley Pettijohn or TJ Alford as second year players, that's generally where that third linebacker spot has come from the last couple of years, whether it was Arvell Reese in 2024, Peyton Pierce last year as a sophomore being that third guy. And the trajectory is just fine. It worked out for Arvell Reese. It has worked out for, I was going to say Cody Simon, but Cody Simon also started before he was that third linebacker because him and Tommy Eichenberg kind of switched back and forth. But that third linebacker, whoever it is, that just leads to the next year being something even more substantial. So whoever wins that, like you don't have to win the starting job. You don't have to win that Will spot to be set up for a solid, very productive career at Ohio State. The third linebacker will set you up for that just as well. And you can have all kinds of impact as that third linebacker as well. You're just not going to be playing as much. Tom, can I give you somebody in the secondary? And I'm not going to go with the obvious guy. I'm going to say Leroy Roker.
Oh,
because here's why. Everybody is already just it's Terry Moore, it's Earl Little, it's Jalen McClain. What about Leroy Roker? And this is a guy that was with the ones for the first half of spring before either he gave way to Terry Moore or they wanted to see Terry Moore with the ones after some rust got shaken off. But this is Leroy Roker this is his opportunity to say, no, I can play, and let's find a place for me to play. He played last year kind of as a dime when other guys were hurt, and he was maybe like the seventh DB, but would be the sixth when somebody went out. They really like him, and he's athletic. He's got good size. He's got good range. This is his opportunity to say, you're going to have to find room for me.
And I think there is potentially a role for him this year. And I would say going into fall camp, my assumption is he's probably the fourth safety, where if anyone goes down, he's probably the next man up there. But you could certainly earn a bigger role one way or the other, even if those guys are healthy. You could certainly carve out a spot for yourself. He was a much bigger part of the conversation this spring than I was anticipating heading into the spring, and sort of stayed in that spot. We didn't see Terry Moore doing nearly as much, nearly as early in the spring. And I think Leroy Roker was certainly a part of that. And now it's a question of, okay, can you sort of maintain that spot right in that conversation? Because, yeah, I think there's a real opportunity for him to at least secure a rotational spot and be a 15, 20 snaps a game. And maybe it's a lot more than that. We just sort of see how the fall goes. I'm assuming when you said the obvious one, that you were not going to talk about the obvious guy. The obvious guy feels like it's Devin Sanchez, because it's, that he's going to be the guy who, takes that really freshman year. Like he was ahead of where all these other freshmen we've been talking about on this show were. So you figure he's going to be ahead of them as well. To me, he's your starter right now. So yeah, it's a big camp for him. To me, it's almost, and this, maybe I'm overthinking this, but is this not a bigger fall for Dominick Kelly in some ways than it is for Devin Sanchez? Like Devin Sanchez, it feels like he's going to be the starter, and it's just a question of how good can he be this year? And that's obviously a huge question. Dominick Kelly is kind of is he ready? Is he ready for prime time? Is he ready to be someone who is in that conversation with Jermaine Matthews, with Devin Sanchez, to play meaningful snaps? Or can he be, they haven't really done the 3-corner rotation thing as much as they did in in sort of previous eras. Do they feel they can do that this year? Because he's another second-year guy. He played at Georgia last year and was, kind of in the same sort of genre as a lot of these true freshmen we were talking about at Ohio State, where, there was a lot of buzz around him. He was playing situationally, only playing in certain sort of moments, but making the most of those opportunities. He's kind of the cornerback version of the Riley Pettijohn, the TJ Alford, the Zion Grady. I mean, these guys we've been talking about on this show. If he can earn a spot, I think that third corner spot is really wide open right now, very much up for grabs. And I think with a good camp, he could earn that spot and maybe earn a spot as a real rotational player this year.
Yeah, no, this was my obvious answer. That's why I left it for you, Tom. But the potential is there. We saw him; he looked very good in the spring. So I have no issues with anything that you're saying. As you're talking, though, I'm thinking this is also an opportunity for Cameron Calhoun.
Oh yeah,
to jump, to jump Dominick Kelly, or to be somebody that they just want to have that veteran presence out there. Maybe he's good in the slot, maybe he's good outside, where he's, yes, I'm a veteran, but I can also, I'll show it on the field. And Ryan Day always talks about how he wants his veterans to play veteran. And maybe that's something that Cameron Calhoun can do. So yeah, I think there's a number of guys. And when we talked about the linebackers, it's basically the same answer that I said with the defensive ends. Like whoever wins that job opposite of Peyton Pierce, like they have the most to gain. And whoever finds a role that is outside of the established starters, they have the most to gain and can push themselves into that rotation. And what we do know is it's up to the player whether they get on the field or not. And you've got coaches here on the defensive side of the ball for Ohio State looking for players to play. Larry Johnson didn't want to stop playing Beau Atkinson last year just because, he had to stop playing him for a reason. They want to play more. They want to play more corners. They want to play more linebackers. They want to get more guys on the field. Trust me, James Laurinaitis wants to play 6 linebackers if he could. He would do it. But it's up to the linebackers. It's up to the corners. It's up to everybody to show that they belong. And I think they've got some guys that can do that this year. and certainly in camp. And then after 10 or 12 practices, you've got to start paring it down to say, okay, who's playing against Ball State in preparation for Texas?
Yeah, exactly. This is a time of year when they want to see everything. They want to make sure they have given everyone an opportunity, because you did that in the spring, but a lot can change between the spring and the start of fall camp, and guys can get a lot better, guys can get healthy, guys can get hurt, a lot can change. So that's why these first few days of fall camp are always really, really a chance to gain a lot of insight into what this fall is really going to look like.
Yeah, because in spring, that's when you clean up surgeries and all of those sorts of things. So you don't really get to see your full team until fall camp. And we're all interested in seeing what that looks like. We will be talking about it at BuckeyeInsiders.com once camp gets underway. And in fact, we are talking about it before then as well. Would love to see you over there. You sign up now and join us for the price of a lousy chain store pizza, as we know. And of course, you'll get much more than that over at BuckeyeInsiders.com. So would love to see you all there. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.